Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Crime Family. I'm your co host, AJ, and I'm here with my two sisters, Lisa and Katie. And today we are going to be talking about the Kiara Agnew case. And this is the devastating story of a young Canadian woman who was murdered while traveling abroad and the long, painful fight for justice that continues today. So much of what we know about this case actually comes from recent coverage by W5, which is a Canadian investigative journalism series. So, in the W5 episode titled If I'm Ever Found Dead, journalist Avery Haynes travels to Mexico. She retraces Kiara's final steps and speaks with key people connected to the investigation, all in an effort to get answers for Kiara's family and keep her story in the public eye. And this episode of W5 is actually what made me aware of the case. I wasn't really familiar with it until just a week or two ago when the episode aired. And there's actually been some very recent new developments that have come out in the case that obviously I'll get into. But before that, we will go back to where it all began. So Kiara Agnew was just 23 years old. She was from Dawson Creek, British Columbia. Originally, she was from New Brunswick. Kiara was born on March 11th, 1999, and she was described as very adventurous, loving, and very ambitious. And she actually had always dreamed of traveling the world since she was a little girl. And in her diary, she had a list of places that she wanted to visit before she turned 35. Mexico was the first country on that list. And in early 2023, she finally booked her first big trip outside of Canada. And it was a stay at the Grand Sunset Princess Hotel, which was a 5-star luxury resort in Mexico's Maya Riviera. And this trip was to celebrate her upcoming 24th birthday, which would have been in March of 2023. So according to her sister Tiana, Kiara had been counting down to this trip for months. So she would post excited updates on social media. She sent videos from the airport, and she had filmed the view from the airplane as they were arriving in Mexico. So it's obviously something she had waited years for. And traveling with Kiara was her boyfriend, Ryan Friesen. So Kiara sends a video right after arriving at the resort. I believe, I don't know if she posted it online or she just sent it to her family, but she talks about having just settled into their room. She's clearly excited with plans to go get food and then head to the beach. But tragically, just hours after this video is taken, Kiara Agnew would be dead. So at 2:55 a.m. on March 3rd, one of the resort's cleaners was dispatched to clean up a mess in a hallway on one of the lowest levels of one of the resort buildings. And that mess turned out to be blood. It was splattered on the wall in a way that, according to the cleaner, looked like someone's head may have been slammed up against it. There was also large amounts of blood on the floor near the wall, where it appears there had been some type of struggle. And the cleaner also noted Kiara's shoe was lying outside a partially opened laundry room door. And inside the laundry room, the cleaner found Kiara and Ryan lying side by side, with Ryan's head near Kiara's feet. So Kiara was fully clothed and described as lifeless. The cleaner says he had to shake Ryan to wake him up. Ryan was clearly intoxicated and barefoot, and he immediately tried to run up the stairs away from the scene. He was quickly captured and held until the police arrived shortly after. And one of the first responders, Victor Gomez, is still traumatized by what he saw at that crime scene. So Avery Haynes interviews him in the W5 episode, and he says that she was, quote, unrecognizable and her face was covered in blood, end quote. He goes on to say, quote, there was no way he could save her. She was dead when he got there, end quote. So the cleaner recalls Ryan screaming and crying, and he also remembers overhearing the police saying, quote, he's still drunk, but starting to remember what he did, end quote. Toxicology reports later showed alcohol in Ryan's system, but he tested negative for any other substance. There was also a resort security guard who later testifies in the trial of this case, who says that there were no security cameras in any of the resort hallways. So a very violent, bloody scene, and it seems pretty obvious what happened. There was only one other person there, Ryan, who was very drunk and tried to run away, was his first response. That doesn't obviously look very good. And then when we get into the medical reports, so there was a medical report that documented visible cuts on Ryan's right hand and foot. There was also noticeable swelling of his left hand and a bite mark on his right hand. Photos taken after his arrest show significant swelling in both hands, injuries that were described as not being consistent with defensive wounds, but it was someone who had punched another person multiple times. So if you're punching so much and so violently that your hands are swollen. Kind of gives you an indication of, the injuries that might be on the other person. So he also had cuts on his elbows, bruises on his shins, and bloody feet, which were described as consistent with kicking someone several times. So there was a handwritten statement that was done by the first police officer on the scene. And that written statement says that Ryan had blood stains on his clothes, his hands, and his feet. Now, that's going to be an important point later. So just remember that this account says that he had blood stains on his clothes, hands, and feet. Kiara's autopsy revealed the extent of the violence. So, according to W5, nearly every inch of her body was brutalized. She had chipped teeth, blackened eyes, injuries to her ears and neck, and damage to every vital organ. The beating was so severe that Kiara's brain stem was detached from her spinal cord. So, it was clear that she had been violently and brutally attacked. Her boyfriend, Ryan Friesen, was arrested and charged with Kiara's murder. He was taken into custody and jailed in Playa del Carmen, or just outside of Playa del Carmen, as the investigation moved forward. And he was eventually charged with femicide, which is one of Mexico's highest charges and carries a sentence of up to 50 years in prison. And so femicide is described as, the murder of a woman, and it's a murder that's because of the fact that she was a woman. So it's like kind of a hate crime or a gender-based violence hate crime. And so I guess that would have to be how you would have to prove it in a court, is like you would have to prove that it was motivated by gender, and that was the reason for the murder. I guess if it's femicide and that's how it's described, I don't know. But it is one of Mexico's highest domestic violence charges, and it carries up to a 50-year sentence. So as investigators dug into Ryan's background, and then again during the W5 investigation, troubling details start to emerge. So court documents revealed that in 2018, Ryan had been involved in an assault against a former girlfriend, which resulted in a peace bond. Before that, he had no criminal record. But there was also evidence of abuse in his relationship with Kiara. So Kiara had documented dozens of photos showing black eyes, bruises, scratches, and other injuries. She wrote of various incidents in her diary, such as a time when he had choked her and hit her head against a wooden bed frame several times. Then another time, she describes him hitting her several times and being extremely angry, only to pass out and not remember the incident the next morning. And one particularly disturbing incident involves Kiara jumping out of Ryan's pickup truck while it was moving. Her stepfather later explains that she suffered a large wound on her leg or knee, I believe, as a result of that incident. So Kiara allegedly wrote in her diary, among other things, that, quote, "If I am ever missing or found dead, you know who did it," end quote. So clearly based on the history of not only his relationship with her, but also his relationships before, not really looking good for Ryan there. I guess just based on that history that I just went over that they uncovered, obviously this Ryan has a history of abuse, not only with Kiara and his relationship with her, but also his past relationships. And then also just the immediate crime scene that, the first responders saw is very bloody, is very violent. It's just, it looks like it could be a very clean cut, or, very obvious as to what happened. But it's not so clear cut, and there's a lot of stuff that does kind of go on that just kind of make it a little bit murky to some people anyway. In the months leading up to her death, the abuse that she had been experiencing appeared to be escalating. So family members say they were increasingly afraid for Kiara's life. Her birth father, Trevor, tried to intervene, but Kiara insisted that no one get involved. So she believed the violence only happened when Ryan was drinking, and said that Ryan had planned to quit so that the issue would be resolved. And so reluctantly, her family kind of stepped back, but her sister describes in the W5 episode that she feels an immense amount of guilt now that we know where it all led to, because of the fact that she didn't maybe do enough, and she has that guilt that she could have done more. And Kiara's aunt, Tanya, tells W5 that after the news of Kiara's murder became known, ex-girlfriends of Ryan started reaching out to her and her family with similar stories of domestic abuse during his drunken episodes or stupors. So this is kind of a pattern with him that the family is seeing. Obviously, these people are reaching out. They didn't have to reach out. So, it's, I think we can believe what they're saying. And it's very similar to what has transpired in his relationship with Kiara. Kiara's sister Tiana believes that she stayed in the relationship because of a shared grief. So in 2020, Kiara lost her 20-year-old brother, Jordan, and Ryan had actually lost his brother years earlier, back in 2010. So they say that that shared trauma kind of created what the family describes as a trauma bond, something that kept them together even though the alleged abuse intensified. So maybe she felt some kind of connection with Ryan because of that, or some kind of safety or some sort of trust because they had both gone through that same thing. And she, you know, other people couldn't really understand what that was like except for him. What are your thoughts so far of the crime scene and what happened? Any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see who they think it could be if it's not him.
It's definitely not looking good for Ryan. I mean, in my mind, like, who else could it have been?
Yeah, so Ryan obviously hires a lawyer right away and fights the charges. So he provides a detailed account of what he says happened the night that Kiara died. And in the W5 episode, Kiara's stepfather, Ricky, recounts Ryan's version of events. So the thing about this case is that the trial and everything happened in Mexico. None of the full court documents had ever been released to the public. They've been released to certain people, but not to the public. And so there's a lot of gaps in the information that we know. And also, Ryan refused to talk to the W5 investigators during their coverage of the case. So, like, they had tried multiple times to get an interview with him or to get a statement
Were
from
they
him.
were they chasing him?
Yes, they do chase him. I love the reporter in that show. She's the one who goes and she'll like follow their car, and like there's one part where she's like he stopped on the side of the road and she like goes up to his car. She's like he stopped on the side of the road for a brief stop, and she like runs up to his truck and tries to like interview him. But yeah, so he would refuse to give like an actual official interview. And obviously his part of the story that was told at trial has never been given, like, revealed through court documents. So what his side of the story is told to us through Kiara's stepfather, Ricky, who was told these versions of events. So it's kind of like secondhand information, but this is what we know of what Ryan's defense was during the trial. So Ryan says that after several hours of drinking at a sports bar on the resort, he and Kiara returned to their room around midnight. He admits that they argued about like taking pictures or something, and says that he went to bed like right after the fight. And then a couple of hours later, around 2:30 a.m., he claims that he woke up and Kiara was gone. She wasn't in the room. So he says he left the room to go look for her and could hear her screaming. And he follows the screams all the way down to the laundry room, which is where he's later found laying next to her body. And then, according to Ryan, the door was locked and he banged on the door several times. Someone eventually did open the door, and he claims that inside the room he saw Kiara on the floor and that she told him she had been raped. And the cleaner that discovered Kiara's body said that there was no lock on the laundry room door. So this kind of contradicts Ryan's account that he had banged on the door. And I don't know if that was an attempt to explain why he had swollen hands, trying to say that maybe it was from banging on the door so hard trying to get in. But the cleaner has said on the record that there was no lock on that door. So that doesn't really line up with that. There's a man named Dr. Salvador Miguel Martinez who is interviewed in the W5 episode, and he says that he was contacted by one of Ryan Friesen's lawyers during all of the proceedings to provide a medical opinion about the autopsy. And so he looks at the autopsy, examines it, and he concludes that due to the severity of Kiara's injuries, there was no way that she would have been alive to tell Ryan that she had been raped, like he had said. He said that she was conscious, she was awake when he first went in there. But this man says that there's no way, given those injuries, if those injuries had happened, it was after severe beating, and she would not have been conscious to even do that. So he also noted that the reports made no mention of evidence of sexual assault. So the autopsy didn't mention that at all. So Dr. Martinez reviews also the blood splatter evidence, because there's like a blood splatter report that goes along with this, and states that the projection splatter that is at the scene indicates that Ryan was standing when Kiara's blood splashed onto him. So they did a blood splatter analysis of what was on Ryan and said that those had to have been like he was standing when that blood went onto him. So it's not like he laid down next to her and got blood on him that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched a lot of Dexter, so I kind of understand. Like, obviously, I don't understand the blood spatter, but like, I get that a splatter on a wall is very different than if you're, like, smudging it with, like, your clothes on the floor, that kind of thing.
Mhm. So Ryan also claimed that there were 3 or 4 people in the room with Kiara, but said that that was the last thing he remembered, so he couldn't really explain how he went from standing at the door to laying on the ground. So he says that that part is just gone out of his memory. So he says that he just walked in, saw her screaming, saying she was raped, and there was, like, 3 or 4 other people in there. And then the next thing he remembers is, like, being woken up by this cleaner. And apparently he was asked multiple times, like, how that happened, what happened in between those 2 periods, and he couldn't say. So that was not great. Avery Haynes is the name of the journalist in W5, and she travels to Mexico, and she actually stays in the same room that Kiara and Ryan checked into. And part of her investigation is she retraces Ryan's claimed route. And so she walks all the way from the room down to the laundry room where Kiara's body was discovered. And she finds out that it's about a 6-minute walk and it's over 400 steps between the two places. And given that distance, it appears very unlikely that Ryan could have heard screams from that far away without anyone else hearing them as well. So that's the one question that comes up is he heard these screams from that far away and is following them, but he has to pass, like, as she says, as she's retracing these steps, like, you pass hallways and hallways of hotel rooms. She's like, no one else heard the screams from that far. He can hear them and he's going towards them, but no one else is concerned. No one else says they heard anything. So even the rooms that were like the closest to the laundry room didn't hear anything,
So they talked to
supposedly.
all those people that said they didn't hear anything?
Well, I don't know if they talked to them specifically, but no one else ever came forward
Like,
and said
came
they heard
forward?
anything. Like,
Yeah.
no one came out of their room to see what was going on. Like, there was like she had to go like across the hall, down these thing into the other building, across the thing, and like there's room like rows and rows of hotels rooms, but no one else ever seemed concerned. Like, if he
Yeah.
can hear them from that far away, but the rooms that are closest to it, either they're just terrible, they don't give a shit. They're just like, okay, whatever's happening, like, So that was just weird anyway, but not impossible, I guess, but just kind of weird that no one else would have said that they heard anything or raised concerns at all. So nearly 18 months later is when Ryan's trial is underway, and Kiara's family says that they were barred from attending the proceedings except when they were testifying. So they did testify in the trial. Obviously, I guess they would have just been character witnesses, or I guess witnesses to Brian's previous abuse, because they weren't obviously there when her murder happened. So they couldn't testify in any of that. But they were only allowed into the courtroom when they were testifying. They were not allowed at all in the courtroom after that. And apparently that was at Ryan's request. So Kiara's sister says that he had asked and requested that her family not be in the courtroom at all, other than when they were mandated to be there to testify. So as a result of this, they were really left relying on secondhand information. So they get statements from Ryan's lawyer and the prosecutors telling them things about what's going on, but they never really get a full picture of the evidence that's for or against Ryan in the case. And so Kiara's family was being texted updates by the lead prosecutor during the trial, and he was giving them indications through text that it was like a slam dunk case against Ryan. It was open and shut, very obvious what had happened. So that was the prosecutor's perception of it. And so they're kind of hearing things through the grapevine, and they feel confident going into it, but they don't really know because they're not there to see it for themselves. So after the proceedings conclude, and it's a judge-only trial, so there was no jury at all. So they reached the verdict, and it was a shocking verdict. So Ryan was found not guilty of Kiara's murder. And the family was left shocked and very confused as to how he could be found not guilty when the facts seemed so obvious. And again, that was based on the information they were receiving. So they're going along with the prosecutor saying it's slam dunk, like open and close, very simple. And then they get this verdict. So in the W5 episode, there's some text messages from one of the prosecutors that the journalist Avery Haynes reads out loud, and it gives a little bit of insight into what went into the judge's decision and why the not guilty verdict was decided on. And the text messages stated that, quote, the injuries he has on his fists and body do not correspond to the injuries caused to Kiara, and that, quote, Kiara's death was carried out by 2 or more people because she was badly beaten and Ryan has no serious injuries, end quote. And also that, quote, the genetic profiles of several people appear, including Ryan's, end quote. So that was just sort of a little bit of an idea into what might have went into the judge's
I find it
decision.
weird that they didn't consider if there was more than one person, he could have still been one of those people. He didn't have like enough injuries for it to just be him, but he could have participated. Did that was that like a consideration at all? I just completely ruled him out.
Yeah, I think it was because, and again, this is because we don't have the full court transcripts or not the whole picture is known, but apparently the judge determined that the injuries to Ryan's like hands and feet didn't match Kiara's injuries. So I'm sure they went in the trial into the deep details of like the autopsy and what the medical examiner said. And apparently there was enough evidence to suggest that his wounds didn't match hers. And the fact that it was so severe that there was multiple people. So I guess that was, and then she concluded, well, his are inconsistent with hers, and there was multiple people, so we can say it wasn't him. But it also
But
doesn't
they
explain
say,
how he got
Like,
his
but
wounds.
well, yeah, I'm saying like yeah, he could have like punched and kicked her just like a couple times, and then someone else took over. Like, how do they know that he didn't at least do one hit?
and also, like, where are they saying the wound? He has wounds on him, so where are they saying where are those wounds from then?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Knocking on the door, apparently. Like,
Yeah, good question. I mean, I guess it's the implication that it was he banged on the door so hard that he had those. That might explain why his hands were swollen. But then the cleaner said there was no door or no lock on the door, so that wouldn't really make sense. So and yeah, and like I get like he also had like his fingernails had blood underneath like his fingernails were soaked in
but
blood and cuts all
what
over him.
did they ever say what? Give an explanation for like if he did beat her, then what was it from?
That's we don't know. Like I said, they never released the full court document, so that's why everyone was sort of like really shocked because they like well the judge thought there was enough evidence in this case to have him not guilty, but no one ever really came out and said, okay, here's what the evidence was. They didn't get a transcript. They don't have the full court documents, so they're just left with so many questions of like, okay, well, did they explain what those injuries were from? What was the explanation if they did? So, given that there's so much of that information missing, it's just
maybe I'm thinking maybe he like was involved in like a fight with somebody else, and then he kind of like ran and like just left her there, and that's why she died. And maybe that's why he didn't want the family there because he didn't want to admit that he fought for himself and then bailed, and then she died because of that. That could be an option.
but then he didn't bail because he was laying next to her body when they found her. So then he went back.
Oh,
This is kind
yeah,
of weird.
yeah, okay, that is weird.
And also, I didn't get to this part yet, but I have more questions about like the blood, some of the blood stuff, which I'll get into when I get to that part. But like, yeah, so there's just like so many questions because, and also remember the family's being kind of fed this information by the prosecutor, like, oh, it's slam dunk, like, and it kind of seems like it based on the information we know, right? It seems pretty obvious, and his defense seems a little bit implausible, right? That he heard her scream, no one else did. He follows her screams when they're that far away and can't remember. Oh, how convenient! You can't remember like what happened once you went in the room. You like black out and then you don't remember anything. We don't really know what goes in those gaps and how to make you can't how did they get to that conclusion of not guilty when it seems so obvious. So after the trial, Ryan is returned back to Canada, and so he goes back to Dawson Creek, and there's a series of protests across Canada in BC and also in Alberta and in New Brunswick. And there were like people with signs and protesting that he was guilty, and now he's like they think he's a murderer, that he got let out, and now he's just living in the community again. And so in late 2025, so the verdict happened in 2024 because it was 18 months. So she was killed in March of 2023. The trial and the verdict happens in like 18 months later, September 2024.
I never heard of this. Weird.
Yeah, I know. I never heard of this either until just this episode that I saw. But then, and then in late 2025, or at some point in 2025, so Ryan's back in Dawson Creek. He allegedly had set up a meeting in a Dawson Creek hotel room in a Dawson Creek hotel with himself, his father Grant, and also he had Kiara's mother Michelle and Kiara's aunt Caitlin there, and Kiara's stepfather Ricky was also at the meeting because he was considered a neutral party. And the reason that it was only those people and not others is I'll get into a little bit later. So Ricky, who is Kiara's stepfather, he tells Avery Haynes and W5 that he thinks the goal of that meeting was to have the protests stop and to convince them of his innocence. So he was kind of being harassed, I guess. There's protests, and then there was allegedly he was being like harassed at his place of employment and stuff like that. And so the goal of this meeting was to just get them off his back and to kind of convince them once and for all that he actually was innocent. So there were rumors that Ryan's lawyer from Mexico was also there at this meeting, but when they get to that part of the conversation in this interview, Ricky is kind of shady about it. He says that he was told during that meeting not to share the information about whether Ryan's lawyer was there or not. And he says because it could put lives at risk if he were to disclose that. But that's all he really says. He clearly trying to avoid it. He doesn't want to talk about it in the interview, even though she kind of pushes it and wants to know why, but he won't say.
Wait, say that again. Don't say the lawyer's there because it's
Yeah, like the people were saying, like it's I think it's pretty well known now that Ryan's lawyer was there. But like Ryan's lawyer flew in from Mexico to attend this meeting and was there at this meeting. But Kiara's stepfather was told not to say that the lawyer was there and what the lawyer said because it could put people's lives at risk if that information got out to the public. So, and clearly it's like I said, he doesn't want to talk about it in this interview when it comes up. And so he says it's probably, whether that's true or not, like whether it really would put people's lives at risk or if they just said that so that to put some fear into him or something. I don't know, but it was just really shady. And so, according to the allegations, so in that meeting, the information was shared and there was allegations that there were claims that the Sinaloa cartel was actually responsible for Kiara's murder. And it was allegedly because the resort that they were staying at had failed to pay the required cartel tax. So the cartel had it out for this particular hotel and say that they went onto the resort and killed just a random person, which happened to be Kiara, to send a message to the resort that, like, you have to pay us, kind of thing. And in the W5 special as well, Avery Haynes, she interviews an active member of the Sinaloa cartel. And he was familiar with this case because he was in jail at the same time as Ryan Friesen was in Mexico. And so he was familiar. And he said everyone in the jail was kind of talking about the Canadian woman that was killed at the resort and that this guy was in prison for that, or because he was accused of that. And so he says on camera in this interview with Avery Haynes that the cartel had nothing to do with Kiara's murder. He explains that when the cartel sends a message, there's no doubt about who's responsible. It's very clear. They want people to know that they did it and that they do not kill tourists and they don't operate on resorts because it causes too many problems for them. So that's what the cartel member says. But I mean, take that with a grain of salt because it's a cartel
But
member.
I feel like that's like a good point. Like, why would they kill some random person? And then people are like, who did this? What does this mean? Like, you'd think if they were going to do that, they would at least kill like employees of the resort or like executives, like not a random person that just happens to be there. Because it really doesn't send a message. I mean, if you, like he said, if you have no idea who did it and why, then it doesn't send any message at all.
Yeah, like you'd think there'd be like a very clear, like whether it's they have like an MO, it's very clear, oh, it's the cartel that did this because of these details. Like they leave something at the crime scene or like some type of like, message, right? They want people to know. They're not going to sit there and deny that they did it. They want everyone to know that they did it. They would be doing the opposite of it. So yeah, that is a good point. And also we do know that what he did say though is that they don't kill tourists or operate on resorts. Like we do know that that is not true because in W5 they also bring up other cases where tourists are targeted for random killings. There is a travel advisory on the Canadian government's website about Mexico and says you could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like cartel violence, you could just be caught up in it because you get unlucky kind of thing. So it is something that the cartel can do, but he's in the interview saying that like, no, we don't kill tourists or we don't go on to resorts because that's just bad for business. But I'm not really sure if the cartel has any kind of rule. I mean, I'm sure they have rules, but that doesn't seem like a line that they wouldn't be willing to cross if they really, had it out for someone or wanted to send a message. So that's the part of his thing that doesn't really make sense to me. It's like, I'm pretty sure they do kill tourists. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a known fact that that does happen. So it's kind of hard when he says like that other thing, which is a good point, but then he says that right after. It's like, well, how do you believe anything he says? But yeah. So that was kind of the information that was told at this secret meeting in this hotel room. And that was kind of what they were told, was that it was the cartel that was responsible. And this would have been information that I'm assuming was presented at trial that went into the not guilty verdict in some way. Again, we don't know for sure, but Ryan's lawyer allegedly also told the family during that meeting that DNA evidence proved Ryan was innocent because his DNA was not found under Kiara's fingernails, and that there were other DNA profiles of unknown people that were found. And, you know, there's also an independent firm, I guess, in Ontario that W5 consults, and like they talk about this with, and they say, and it's kind of obvious too, that the like not having the DNA under the fingernails doesn't prove innocence or guilt, because just because it's not under fingernails doesn't mean that she
Wait,
would have
they
that,
said
right?
they found unknown like DNA under her fingernails?
Yeah, that was part of the argument, was that there was unknown DNA found under her fingernails that wasn't Ryan's. And so that's what contributed in some way to the verdict, because if there was like DNA tissue or something that was found under her fingernails. And also they argue, this like independent firm, I think in Ontario, that W5 consults with, they say like um it's not unusual because, if somebody didn't put up a fight, like if she wasn't able to fight off her attacker, she wouldn't have it under her fingernails, right? You only get that if you're a defensive, if you're like putting up a fight, right? You would get that. So if they like attacked her from behind or something and she never actually was able, I don't know. So it's not possible. And also it's not unusual to have foreign DNA under your fingernails. Like you're touching things, you're at a resort, like you'd be touching these with your fingers. There's other people's DNA that you could get on your fingernails, right? So they're saying the lack of Ryan's DNA doesn't prove that he was innocent of it. Because like they're saying he could have done it, just didn't get his DNA under her fingernails. The presence of other people's DNA doesn't say that they were involved either, right? So anyway, that's inconclusive, and that's not really a good argument to go by, really. So apparently after this meeting, so Kiara's aunt Caitlin and Kiara's mother Michelle kind of just accepted this evidence, and they were satisfied with it, and they believe the Mexican courts, and they believe that Ryan is innocent of this crime. So whether there was more stuff at that meeting that was also disclosed, but whatever they were told convinced them that Ryan was actually innocent. And so this actually was quite sad. It divided the family, because there's some of the family that believes that Ryan is innocent. And there were two separate Facebook pages that were set up. One was called Justice for Kiara, and that was run by the paternal side of Kiara's family, who believe that Ryan is guilty. And another one is called Silence is Violence, Justice for Kiara. So Caitlin, which is Kiara's aunt, she later posted a public statement on Facebook about Ryan's innocence. And this post appears on the Silence is Violence, Justice for Kiara Facebook page. And I'm actually going to read the full post. It is a little bit lengthy. It's like a page and a half, but I am going to read it because she actually does provide more information about what they were told in that meeting with Ryan and his lawyer in that hotel. That give you probably a little bit more of an idea of why they're so adamant that he is innocent in all of this after that meeting.
It's like, oh, he knows a woman beater. He beat the shit out of my daughter, but I'm also gonna proclaim that he didn't do this. Like, I wouldn't even try to fight for the innocence if he was a piece of shit.
Yeah. And that's why it's like intriguing to know like what exactly they were told in that meeting, because whatever it was, they believed it and it convinced them. Like it's not really about him necessarily. It's more so just like they want the real person who did it to go to prison, right? So it's not so much that they like love Ryan, I wouldn't say, but probably just like we want the real person responsible to go down for this kind of thing. So so yeah, this is a full post, which like I said, it is lengthy, but I'm going to read it because I think adds a little bit more context to this whole thing. So it says, "Dear reader, 365 days have passed since I first started sharing Kiara's story, and here I am again giving her a voice and highlighting the gross mishandling of this case by a multitude of people, from the prosecution to members of her own family. I have sat down to write on multiple occasions, to no avail, words not flowing, blocked by the sea of emotion, guilt, and shame that I feel. 365 days ago, I shared what we knew from shared stories, diary entries, and testimony from those who reached out, starting to paint an incomplete picture of Kiara's relationship. Today, I'm adding more color. 365 days ago, I was told by many that I would never have the opportunity to sit down and talk with Ryan. Yet, at the beginning of July, I found myself sitting across from him and his dad, alongside Kiara's mom, chosen dad, and his longtime partner. From the moment we walked into the room, everything changed. I have spent the summer just absorbing the reality of everything disclosed in those hours. Attendees of this meeting were chosen specifically due to their relationship with Kiara and their ability to use active listening skills, have an open mind, and practice emotional regulation. Choosing who to include was not an easy task. And so none of Kiara's paternal side of the family um, were in that meeting because they believed that Ryan was guilty. And so they were not invited to participate in this secret meeting. So they only chose the people that they felt would have an open mind enough to actually believe what Ryan was saying or what his lawyer was saying. So they go on to say, what I know, Ryan Friesen did not murder my niece in Mexico. Ryan's DNA wasn't found on Kiara as previously inferred by investigators. The tissue found on Kiara, what was under her nails, was from her attackers. Kiara had self-defense wounds. She fought back. Videos we were told did not exist. We got to view ourselves. At this meeting, videos we were told did not exist were being played on the big screen before us. Videos of Kiara and Ryan showing up in the exact clothes in which they were found. The tear in Ryan's shorts rippled in the warm breeze. Watching this footage was bittersweet. The look of excitement on Kiara's face as the two arrived was exactly as I had imagined it a year prior. I knew she would have loved the architecture, appreciating the entire experience. Seeing her wide-eyed wonder as she looked around felt like nothing I've ever experienced before. It's left me hungry for answers. Footage from the sports bar showed two people enjoying time together, laughing and socializing with a group of fellow travelers. No footage past leaving the sports bar has ever been shared or provided by the Grand Sunset Princess, despite the multiple security cameras at the resort. So remember also going back to the security guard early on in the investigation said that there were no cameras in the hallways of the resort. But here she's saying in this post that no, there was multiple security cameras at the resort, and the only footage that was ever shared with them was footage from the sports bar itself. Nothing that would have shown them after they left that sports bar. So maybe the implication is that there is more footage somewhere about something happening that isn't being released or being disclosed. So she goes on to say, photos from the crime scene have always painted a bloody fight, starting on the stairs and making its way to the janitorial closet. Yet there is no blood on Ryan when he was arrested. Wearing the same clothes as when he arrived, yet completely absent of blood. Last year I had questions, and this year I have even more. The gravity of the unspoken dangers for those traveling to these resorts is daunting. And also remember, it was said that in one of the handwritten reports by one of the first responders said that there was blood on Ryan's clothes and his hands and his feet. But yet she's here saying that in this meeting, they had proven that there was no blood at all on any of his clothes, which also doesn't line up because if he was found
How
lying next to her and there was that much
how
blood,
do
there
they
would be
prove
blood on his
that?
clothes. Well, apparently they showed footage of like when he was arrested in those clothes, and there's no blood on it at all,
Huh.
according to this. And she goes on to say, one key component of this meeting included the DNA results, something the prosecution did not share with us, despite having the results months after the murder. Why? It wasn't until after the trial that an official document was received from the prosecution that acknowledged the results from their DNA analysis was conclusive to the one performed by the defense. So she says after the trial happened, that's when the prosecutor was like, oh, yeah, we agree with the DNA analysis that the defense provided. Our analysis showed the same thing. And she says, from the start, I have fought to have Kiara's voice heard. I have invested approximately $3,000 to ensure Kiara got her final wishes regarding her remains, attend her funeral, and show my support in Mexico when the trial started. Silence is violence, and I'm done being silent. Standing by while Kiara becomes another statistic with her name and legacy being contorted into a grotesque hate campaign. All the while, murderers are walking around Mexico unscathed. Did you know in Mexico, if a death occurs at a resort, operations are suspended or affected? The Grand Sunset Princess wasted no time renting out Kiara's room after her death. Grand Sunset Princess still hasn't provided complete footage of that night. Within days of the murder, Grand Sunset Princess was advertising on social media for tourism. No word of the slain Canadian woman that was found within. In Mexico, you are not innocent until proven guilty, as we are here in Canada. So I guess in those, is she trying to point out that like she believes that the hotel is complicit in some way? They know what really happened and they're hiding information based on that because they didn't stop operations. It's like they didn't want an investigation to occur. They were quick to like rent out the room and keep operations going. They didn't release the full footage that she knows they have. So that's, I guess, the implication based on this. So She goes on to say, earlier this year, members of Kiara's paternal side started their own campaign, which included protests across Canada, a keynote presentation by a paternal aunt, asking followers on Facebook to call companies on hearsay that Ryan may be employed, and fictitious claims about Grant, which is Ryan's father. Recently, an episode on some unknown podcast was released, voices dripping in venom and false tears as they spoke about things they know nothing about, angry to have been left out of our meeting. This campaign of hate has traveled far. The disgusting things being said by the Agnews spare no one, not even innocent children. Starting March 4th, 2023, the Agnews have been nothing but against Kiara's voice, all the while screaming Ryan's guilt, making a viral GoFundMe telling the world he murdered Kiara while harassing and bullying Kiara's mother over her dead body, forcing the case to be handled by the Free Mexican prosecution. Justice for Kiara isn't going to come from spreading hate and blowing hot air. Being able to ask the hard questions and listen to the response, accountability, finding out the truth behind what happened in those early hours of March 3rd, 2023. Justice for Kiara comes from standing together in unison. So that was her full post. So I guess, do you guys have any thoughts about that or questions? I mean, I probably do have questions because I still have questions, but.
So that was the mother that was writing that?
The aunt, Kiara's aunt.
The aunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. What she said.
And I believe, why would she lie about that? I believe all the stuff she said she was told in that meeting. I believe she was told, because
it just seems like a complete 180. To all of a sudden support him now. All of a sudden, I mean, the evidence must have been indisputable. I guess I don't know. It's why would y'all that meeting must have been one hell of a meeting. All of a sudden, she's totally thinks it wasn't Ryan. I don't know. I'm just curious to see. I feel like what she was showed in that meeting, wasn't sufficient to me. I'm just confused what evidence she was given.
Yeah, and she says she was shown that there was no blood on his clothes, and that was wearing the same clothes as when they arrived, because she was murdered literally the same day, 12 hours later when they arrived. And she says they arrived in those clothes. Those were the clothes they were found in. He had no blood on them, even though the witness who was there, or the first responder who did that written statement, said there was blood on his clothes. She says that they were shown. Basically, she's saying that because they were told from the start, oh, there's no footage that exists. But then this lawyer was able to show up and show the surveillance footage that shows them in the bar. But the hotel said that didn't exist. So she's kind of trying to say that the hotel, what are they trying to cover up? What is there more to this story that the hotel knows that they're not saying?
No, is because there's no blood on, because there's no blood on his clothes when he was arrested, even though for the longest time, it said there was, that the only piece of evidence that made it turn so completely in Ryan's favor? I don't know. It seems shoddy at best.
I think the no DNA, his DNA was not under her nails. I feel like that is compelling too, though. If she had a bunch of other random DNA under there from her attackers, and not his, because he didn't attack her. That's what
he said he doesn't. The next thing he remembers is being woken up by the cleaner. What do they think fucking happened to him? Would he get hit over the head? Was there any evidence of a head trauma? I don't understand how anyone found that believable.
He was drunk, right? I mean, they were drinking. He could have just passed out. I don't know.
Or it's also not unusual for during a traumatic moment to block it out of your memory. That's a thing that happens.
Yeah.
And I guess they were saying because
he said he knocked the door down, but there was no lock.
Yeah. Well, the cleaner said there was no lock.
I mean, if there was more than one person in that room attacking her, someone could have been holding the door so he couldn't get in. He just thought it was locked.
I just think maybe just because he's a piece of shit that beats women, I just have no. I can't believe anything he says. I just assume the worst. Maybe
allegedly beats women, but
allegedly,
yeah. Alleged piece of shit.
Yeah, but I think it's I what I got from that is that I guess the information that was compelling to them was the fact that the security guard said there was no surveillance footage, but then the lawyer is able to show up with surveillance footage that exists, and they had been told the whole time that there was no surveillance footage that existed, and then he shows up with it. So then they're kind of okay. And then the fact that there was no blood on his clothes when the first responder said there was. But I guess maybe she's trying to say, I think, because then later on it goes on, I think their stance is that the hotel was corrupt, the government was corrupt, the whole process was corrupt. It was rushed. It was a rushed trial trying to find this guy guilty, even though he wasn't, in an attempt to cover up other stuff that might have been happening. So I think that's what it all comes down to, is like there's enough compelling evidence to suggest that like people were lying about certain things that could then be disproven.
Yeah, there's definitely like reasonable doubt kind of thing. Like I mean, I kind of have a little bit of doubt. But then like if there was footage from the hotel, why not just show that? Like that could just like clear everything up right away. I feel like maybe it was hotel employees, or like maybe it was somebody in the mob that the hotel but the hotel's like working with the mob. You know what I mean? Like, could be owned by the mob. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. There's something on there that the hotel doesn't want people to see. Because you think the police would be like, give me that footage. Like they can subpoena that and you have to give it to them.
Yeah, but
Well, see,
also the police could be corrupt too. Maybe they
So I
didn't
was
even
gonna
do
say
an
that
that's the
investigation.
thing.
I was gonna say that whole place is probably corrupt. Like police are working for the cartel, like so much money and
Yeah.
all that. The police are working for the cartel. The resorts are all the money that flows. I mean, it probably definitely corrupted. Everybody there was corrupt, I bet.
Yeah. Like the police are bought by the cartel, basically, I feel. Or a lot of them are. So it's hard to really believe anything they say. But there are, yeah. So
But you think the
I th-
police would that? You think the police would want to pin it on Ryan, and make sure he was found guilty? Then, you know what I mean?
which is, I mean, they did. They
But yeah,
arrested
that's
him
why
right
they
on the
said there was
spot.
blood. Yeah, there was blood on his clothes.
Right,
Even though
right.
if there wasn't, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I think like that's kind of the type of information they were kind of talking about in this meeting in this hotel that was making them question, like, okay, there wasn't a thorough investigation, things were rushed, and we have evidence that goes against what like the police are saying and all of that stuff, and what the hotel is saying. And so then that's when they also discussed that like the hotel or the resort like owed some type of cartel tax to the cartel.
It just seems weird that like he walks in and like there's people in there, but they don't do anything to him. They just leave him and let him pass out drunk. I don't know. Like
I know.
They
That's what I
saw
don't get.
you. He saw you. So why not beat the shit out of
Yeah.
him?
And the cartel doesn't seem like a group of people that would just let someone stay alive
No,
that they
like
witnessed.
like
Like they could see your face. Like
what's more random? What's one more dead random tourist? You know,
yeah.
kill him too. I find that strange if that's the story he's telling is true. Like you walk in and there's people there already.
And also, how did no one else hear it? That's what I don't get. Like he has to go by rooms and rooms of hotels, and no one else heard anything. No one else ever came forward. None of the other tourists ever said they heard screaming. Like I think you would, if you heard, especially if it was like a violent attack, like it clearly was, and she put up somewhat of a fight. Like no one's hearing anything. I don't get it. Like I don't know, but and that's also what's hard too, because like I said, the W5 investigators, they don't have the full story either, because the full transcript has never been released to the public. The full like documents and evidence and stuff has never been said. So they have to go based on like what people who are told by the lawyers who are in the courtroom say. So it's a lot of like hearsay. And there was only one group of people that ever got full access to those documents, and that was the maternal side of Kiara's family. So her aunt and her mother have what's called the Bible in this case, which includes all of the court documents, all of the evidence, all the reports, everything in this case. They have access to that. And that's probably a part of why they're so adamantly saying that he's innocent, because they have access to the full story. But what's also frustrating is W5 says that they refused to do an interview. So like the W5 wanted to get an interview from them to hear their side. They refused to do that. And they also refused to hand over the documents to W5. So it's like, why wouldn't you not, if you're so adamant about this, why not release it? That's what I don't understand. Wouldn't you want that information out there? Wouldn't you be like, yes, please release this so everyone can see it? Because they're so adamant being like, people are spreading hate campaigns, but it's like, you have the whole other half of the story that you're not releasing and not letting anyone see. People aren't going to believe it, but you have the access, you have the things that would literally make people maybe look into it more, but you're refusing to release that. And I don't know, maybe there was some type of thing they had to sign. Like maybe they aren't allowed to release it. That's possible too. But
why wouldn't they say that then? Why wouldn't they be like, we have a non-disclosure agreement or like a gag order or whatever they call it, and we just can't? But they're not saying that. They're just refusing to. So that's weird.
Yeah. So, and it's also weird that they refused to do an interview with W5. Like you'd think you'd want to get your side of the story out there as much as possible, especially in that Facebook post. Like it's very clear that they're frustrated with all the lies and all the slandering and misinformation, but yet they're not going on the record. At least with W5, they're not going on the record. They do interviews, but just not with W5. Maybe they thought W5 was going to like be on the opposite side. I don't know. It's just like everyone who was in that meeting, they're all on the same side, they believe. And I believe, well, I guess the stepfather was like a neutral party. He just kind of wanted, I don't know. But the rest of them all are like adamant that he's innocent based on the information they got on that meeting.
If he is innocent though, and like everyone was trying to frame him, like the police and everything, like thank God for that judge who was like actually was objective, like, and the judge wasn't corrupt as well. I mean, is that judge okay? Do we know what happened to that judge after this? Like, I feel like they went against the conspiracy.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I don't know what happened to the judge. We got like those text messages from one of the prosecutors was like give us insight into what made the decision, but we don't know. We never heard it from the judge directly. And also, I guess when they say that Ryan's innocent, like the people who believe that are saying that like in Canada you're innocent until proven guilty, but they say in Mexico it's the opposite. You're guilty until proven innocent. So they're basically saying that he was seen as guilty from the minute he was found in the laundry room, and it kind of does muddy the waters a little bit because there's a little bit of that reasonable doubt, but it kind of sucks though that you don't have access to actually the full reports, and even W5 doesn't. So they're kind of trying to put the pieces together from what they know, and this is all like secondhand information that people who were at this meeting. But
who were like if there's people in that laundry room, who were they? Like, did they not interview everyone that checked in? Who's checked in?
Well, it probably were cartel members. I think that's the point. They were like part of the cartel that came.
But they never
they weren't
like
hotel guests. They were like Mexican citizens.
That's what this. But what if it was just random hotel guests? I mean, never like.
That's the thing.
Just saying,
did they look at all the hotel guests? Like,
yeah, like are they saying it's cartel for sure?
Well, no, but that was just their argument, I guess. That was what they were told in that hotel room, and I'm assuming that's would have been their argument in the trial too. That, but I guess the whole thing is if they're saying, well, if the hotel is corrupt and they're in on it, they're not going to check into the hotel guests. They're not going to allow the police to do that. If the police are corrupt, they're not going to even try. Like, basically, there was this whole like conspiracy just to like make this innocent man guilty and cover up all this shady shit.
And they're saying like what, like he woke up and she was gone. What, like she went to go continue drinking by herself? Is that something she like? You know what I mean? Like why would she leave? Did they come to the like?
Because I guess they had an argument, and he woke up and she was gone. Probably because like she wanted to get away from him. Maybe she wanted to keep drinking. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. And then like when he left the room to go find her, that's when he heard the screams from down in the laundry room. Conveniently at the same time that he just happens to wake up.
Yeah.
But I just think it's like, so I don't know. I don't buy that at all, actually. I mean, like the whole like cartel thing, like maybe you could say that, but even if it was still the cartel, I don't buy his version of the story. I don't know. I don't really buy his version of events.
Well, me either.
Like he's gonna have to come up with something better, even if it was the cartel and it wasn't just him and it was completely separate. But like, you still have to make it make sense, like how we got to the lunchroom, and I don't really buy it. And then like it's the cleaning person, like he's the one who found the body. And then he when they interview him in W5, he doesn't even work for the resort anymore, and he refused to appear on camera, so they never show his face. But this is the interview, so he's like scared for his safety. But he also stopped working at the hotel probably shortly after that. So I don't really think he has a reason to lie about the door not being locked and all of that stuff. Yeah. So anyway, that was the Facebook post that that Kiara's aunt put on Facebook, and she later goes on public television to publicly apologize and thank Ryan. Kiara's mother and aunt were allegedly, like I said, given the court Bible that contains full court documents, but declined interview requests from W5 and refused to share the files. A crime journalist in the Mayan Riviera describes the timeline as highly unusual, like the timeline in this case, because he says that there's similar cases that often take 5 to 8 years between like the time of the murder to the verdict and the trial. And so Ryan was charged with femicide, which is one of the most serious crimes in Mexico. And he mentions another case with eerily similar details. So there was an American woman, Sativa Transu, who was killed on a Mexican resort in 2021, and her partner was charged with femicide and allegedly beat her to death. So very similar to this case. And that was 18 months before Kiara's death, and that case is still ongoing. It's not even at trial yet, and it's been almost 5 years. They're coming up on 5 years, whereas this one was like rushed through 18 months from the murder to the verdict, which he just says that's kind of a red flag, and it's odd just how quickly it happened. Anyway, like I said, he's acquitted. He goes back to Canada. He has this meeting, and there's like protests about because people think he's guilty. And then, despite his acquittal, prosecutors then later announced that the actual verdict was under review. So, a chief prosecutor says that she was confident it would be overturned and that Ryan would return to Mexico and face justice. And if convicted, he could face up to 50 years in prison. So, Avery Haynes, again, while she's in Mexico, she talks to some of like the, chief prosecutors or like magistrate, and they say that they're reviewing the case. And Ryan releases a statement through his lawyer, and he thanks Kiara's mother and aunt for believing in his innocence. He states that, quote, statements to investigators referencing unidentified suspicious men near the area were not meaningfully pursued, and basic investigation steps such as properly canvassing nearby resort rooms were not done, end quote. And a DNA report analyzed by forensic experts in Canada concluded that Ryan's DNA was not found on her fingernails, like I said, and that one unknown male profile was present, noting that DNA under fingernails does not determine guilt or innocence, like I said before. So then on January 26th, 2026, so literally just 5-6 days ago, Ryan's acquittal was officially overturned and he was declared guilty of femicide. And Ryan has appealed the decision and maintains his innocence. So Ryan is expected to remain in Canada while the appeals process takes place over the next several months. And this is a decision that has angered many and has led to several protests again, because they're not returning him to Mexico right away, even though now technically he's considered guilty of femicide, but he's not being returned to Mexico. He's staying in Canada while the appeals process happens. His lawyers have released a statement, which reads in part, quote, Ryan remains committed to defending his innocence. The past 2 years have been a tremendously challenging and emotional time for Ryan, his family, and Kiara's family, including Kiara's mom, who supports Ryan's innocence. Despite his acquittal based on exculpatory DNA evidence, Ryan is once again being forced to defend his innocence for a crime he did not commit. Ryan remains committed to defending his innocence, including based on clear DNA evidence, and an appeal of the December 2025 decision has already been filed to the further Mexican appeals courts, where a panel of 3 federal judges will now review the case. End quote.
I just hate like when like the person's defense lawyer says something. Like, of course you're gonna say he's innocent. No one cares what you have to say. He's gonna continue to fight for his innocence. Like, no shit. Now you don't have to make a speech about that.
I find it crazy that you can like overturn like an acquittal like that. I thought like it's crazy. I think like once it's done, it's done. But
Yeah. Well, I think here, like, we have like the double jeopardy law.
that's what I
Like,
was
he
gonna
can't
say.
be
Isn't that double
tried.
jeopardy? Yeah, but it's because it's
Yeah.
not Canadian. It's
Yeah. In
Mexican
Mexico, they
law.
do have it's like a different system. It can be reviewed by like a panel of judges, and if they decide that it's not a legit verdict, they can overturn it,
Crazy.
which they did. So, and the magistrate, which is the one that makes that decision, said that like they were ready to bring him to justice. They feel that the trial was not, fair, or like the evidence is like overwhelming that he did it. And so now we're back to like him. He's technically guilty. That's what is on paper. He's guilty now, but they're still doing the appeals process. So he's going to be in Canada while that happens.
He's not technically guilty. Like he didn't get charged yet, right? I mean, he didn't get convicted. He's just charged with it again.
Well, it says on the at the end of the W5 thing that he is guilty.
Oh,
He was
okay.
deemed guilty of it.
I guess because in Mexico, you're guilty until proven innocent. So I guess if you're charged, you're guilty.
Yeah. So, and that was just, like I said, days ago. Like we're recording this, February 1st? And so that was January 26th. So it's just very recent. So it's still going to be an ongoing thing while they do the appeals. And if he is found guilty, then he could be in prison up to 50 years. So he could be going back to Mexico for 50-year prison sentence.
No, crazy.
So it's kind of crazy. So yeah, it's kind of like something that you kind of think it's like cut and dry, pretty cut and dry, like right at the beginning when he's found and all that. But there is some of that reasonable doubt.
Maybe that during this trial, we'll actually get more answers and we'll actually release everything. Because like that stuff from the first trial that never got released and the family's not releasing it. So we really don't know the other side. So maybe we'll actually find that out this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the Kiara Agnew case. That's where it stands right now. So yeah, crazy case. And we'll obviously provide updates as we go along. Like once the appeals process is over in a few months, we'll get I don't know how successful appeals usually are. Probably not very. If it's gotten that far up where they actually overturned it, like I doubt an appeal is going to make a difference. But
what about the Innocence Project is going to say about this, or if they'll even take it?
Yeah. Maybe if they believe he's innocent, they
Yeah.
will. But it's hard to know if you're innocent if you can't even get access to
To
the
the info.
evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, W5 is a pretty big thing in Canada. Like, they weren't able to get it. Like, they're legit. They could, like,
Yeah.
get the information and they weren't able to. So I don't know if the Innocence Project would be able to, but
I know,
maybe.
because the Innocence Projects are like lawyers and stuff. So maybe that's different. Like a lawyer versus just a journalist. I don't know.
That's true. I mean, I guess the family could give the Innocence Project that Bible
Yeah,
that has
that's
everything.
true. Mm-hmm.
Because if they're so adamant that he's innocent, maybe they'll
Yeah, you think they would.
provide that.
Yeah, I mean, this only happened 4 days ago, so they could be looking into it already.
Yeah. But I guess what are your guys' thoughts? Innocent, guilty, unknown?
Guilty.
I knew you were going to say that. Guilty. I don't know. I'm on the fence. That's why I want another trial, because I really am not convinced either way, actually.
I think he's guilty. I really do. But like, because their whole the thing they said in their statement of like the exculpatory DNA evidence that showed there was someone else's DNA under the fingernails and not Ryan's or whatever it was, like. But as I said, as it's been said, that doesn't prove guilt or innocence. And apparently it was like a like it wasn't like a public laundry room. It was like a staff, like a janitorial closet kind of thing where there was a laundry machines, but there's a sign on the door that says staff only. So it wasn't like really like a busy part of the resort. It was also in the middle of the night. But if there was such a big struggle, like it said there was, it looked like there was. No one heard anything. That's what I don't understand. If there's that much of a struggle where like in the hallway there's like so much blood and her head, it's banged against the wall or whatever. She's being beaten up. Like, how does no one hear anything? That's what I don't get. So I don't know. But I do think he's guilty. Just my opinion, not based on anything. Don't come at me. I mean, I don't
I'm
know.
on the fence.
Maybe,
I'm not convinced either way.
maybe share the documents with us and we can get a better view of all the evidence. But like
I
that's
mean,
the thing. But as I said before, like if you're that adamant that he's innocent, but you're refusing to share the stuff that could actually prove that, then it's on you what people think. Like
I feel
you're
like those
withholding half the
documents probably
information.
have a lot on both. They probably have like stuff that looks bad for him too that isn't out there, like more stuff that make him look guilty, but also stuff that I think that those documents show both sides, so they're just like don't want to release it in case someone's going to latch on to the negative side of it more so than the innocent. I feel is probably what they're thinking.
That's true, but they could release it not to W5, but like just in general, like let other people see it.
Yeah,
like I don't know why.
well, maybe they will now.
And I mean, that information's already out there. Like, what's it going to say that he abused women, which we all know, or allegedly he did before? Like, and Kiara wrote in her diary that if she was ever found missing, or she was ever missing or dead, that you know who did it.
Yeah, I mean,
So.
I totally believe her. But yeah, so I'm not saying she's a liar. I feel like she totally is not lying. But and maybe he confesses to that in those documents, and they just don't want that out there on the record to say for sure that yes, he did confess to beating her. I don't know.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, there might be some type of non-disclosure. But yeah, like you said, why wouldn't they just say that? Like we're legally not allowed to release it. Not like we're choosing not to, even though we could. Like,
Yeah, I feel like there's probably details in there that make him look even worse than people think he is, but not enough that he actually murdered her, kind of thing. I think if they release it, it'll make him look worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, maybe they didn't release it to W5 because they figured that W5 would be like on the he's guilty side, and so they didn't. Yeah, like you said, they didn't want them twisting it or using anything in there that would then. Yeah, so I get that, but
It's like you can't just put out the pieces that support your theory. You have to put the whole thing so we can all, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but that's the thing. Like when there's trials of people, like they're not allowed to put like certain things in the trial. Like you're not allowed to say, oh, he like beat his ex-wife if his current wife was found dead, like that kind of thing, because it'll I don't know, skew your judgment of him right away, even though you feel like that's super relevant, but you're just not allowed to say that kind of stuff in certain trials, right? So it's like he did this. It's like the exact same thing happened before, but you're not allowed to bring it up, like that kind of thing. So
But
I
like
don't know.
you'd think that would be relevant. Like
I
I would
know,
want to
but
know that as a
right, because
jury
there's sometimes
member.
you're just not allowed to
Yeah.
say that in court. Like the judge will be like, "No, don't bring it up."
Yeah, and that's why it's so important on who the judge is in the case, because like obviously the lawyer will fight to not have it in the trial, but if the judge allows it,
Yeah.
like that's yeah. And I mean, obviously everyone, I mean, like documentaries can be biased or it's like, but it's like documentaries can be biased, but then the family by not releasing it, they're doing the same thing because she put in that Facebook post all the stuff that they said that showed he was innocent, but then they're also withholding stuff that doesn't go with their argument too. So they're guilty of what the
Yeah, there's a
documentaries could
whole
be.
other side of it. Yeah.
And that's why it's frustrating, like that you can't get the full picture. Because it's also hard to talk about it when you don't know the full story either.
Yeah.
Um,
And it just makes it look more suspicious when you're like withholding some things because there's a reason why, right?
yeah, and like there's like articles and stuff out there about this case, but that W5 episode is like the one that is the only thing that I've seen that actually goes into it like in full depth and stuff. So they, I'm sure, have the most information that anyone has, but they even still say that they don't have a lot really, and are only getting like even when they're getting Ryan's version of events, that was Ryan's version of events as apparently he told them in the hotel room that then the stepfather is telling us like so it's like very kind of like a telephone thing, right? Um so yeah, I don't know, but it's kind of crazy and the whole fact that it actually was overturned is kind of wild. I'll be interested to see how it unfolds for sure. Because I mean, it's also sad that like the whole family's divided too, like completely destroyed the family. But also, it's like they all have the same goal, right? Because they also want to find out who killed her. But it's like they just have different ideas of who did it. And yeah, who knows? Maybe it is a conspiracy. Maybe the resort was behind it, and or it was involved, or knows more. I don't know. But we don't know what we don't know, and we won't know because they don't release it. So I don't know. Anyway, so that does it for this episode of Crime Family. If you are a fan of the show, you can follow us on Crime Family Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And you can also email us, crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. If you have any case suggestions or theories about this case or other cases we've done, or you just want to give your feedback on the show, you can also go to your podcast app and leave us a review of the show if you like. If you are a fan and you want others to know you're a fan or know your feedback, you can leave a review. Yeah, so that's it for this week. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode and case. And until then, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.